Hello and welcome back to the Golden Ancient Tales channel. Today we will be looking into Jericho, the first city on Earth. We travel to an oasis at the edge of the desert where a steady spring feeds a low mound built by many generations. This place is Jericho. People often call it the first city on Earth. But what makes a city in the first place? Is it walls and towers, store grain, craft, and trade, or a community that stays and rebuilds in the same spot over and over? We will follow the story from hunters camping by the water to the first farmers shaping mud brick houses around courtyards. We will look at the great stone tower and the early walls, the layers of rebuilding, the rituals that honored the dead, and the trade routes that carried obsidian, salt, and ideas. Then we will trace Jericho into later ages when kings and merchants left their marks and legend met archaeology. As always, I would love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. Settle in, breathe slowly, and let the past come into focus. This is a story thousands of years old, and tonight it is yours. Let's begin. The breath of the desert. The desert sleeps beneath a pale blue sky. Dunes shimmer like golden silk, and the air itself feels ancient, older than memory. In the distance, faint shapes rise, palms sway near a thin line of green, the oasis of Jericho. Here, in the low basin of the Jordan Valley, the earth dips lower than anywhere else on land, a place so ancient that time itself seems to circle back upon it. At the edge of the oasis stands a mound, quiet, unassuming, shaped by wind and the weight of forgotten centuries. It is called Tel Sultan. To the untrained eye, it looks like any other hill, but beneath that hill sleeps the memory of 10,000 years of human life, layer upon layer, like the pages of an unwritten book. The first footsteps of discovery. Our story begins not in prehistory, but in the 19th century, when curiosity and empire walked hand in hand. A British engineer named Charles Warren arrived here in 1868, spurred by the tales of the Bible and the promise of uncovering lost worlds. He carried notebooks, measuring ropes, and faith that the dust of the desert might whisper its secrets. Warren dug trenches into the mound, searching for the famous walls of Jericho, the very ones that had fallen to the trumpets of Joshua. But what he found was deeper, stranger. Stone walls that predated any known civilization, artifacts older than the pyramids themselves. He could not yet understand what he had found. The world wasn't ready to imagine a city existing 9,000 years before Christ. Warren left puzzled, and the sand swallowed the sight again. The archaeologists who followed, decades later, two German scholars, Ernst Sellen and Karl Watson, arrived in the early 1900s. They brought new tools, new methods, and a quiet conviction that truth lay hidden beneath every broken shard. Their teams worked under a punishing sun, scraping at the mound layer by layer. In their journals, they wrote of walls, towers, ashes, and strange circular dwellings. They believed they had found the Jericho of Joshua, but time would soon correct them. For in the 1950s, another figure would step onto the stage, a woman whose name became synonymous with Jericho's rediscovery, Kathleen Kenyon, the woman who redefined time. Kathleen Kenyon was patient, precise, and relentless. Archaeology in her time was changing, no longer about digging quickly to reach treasure, but about stratigraphy, the slow reading of soil like the lines of an ancient poem. When she arrived at Tel Sultan, she saw not a hill, but a timeline. 13 meters deep, each layer of civilization, each color of a chapter in the human story. Her trowel moved gently through the ages, from the Islamic period to the Iron Age, to the Bronze, and further down into deep prehistory, a world before metal, before writing, before kings. There, in the lowest layers, she found what no one expected. Stone walls, plaster floors, round houses, and tools made of flint. Radiocarbon dating would later reveal their staggering age, more than 11,000 years old. Kenyon stood at the edge of human civilization and realized Jericho was older than all known cities, older even than the idea of city itself, the landscape of origins. As the narrator's voice softens, imagine the setting. A warm breeze moves through reeds and palms. The oasis glows at sunset, orange light reflecting in the water of the Ain Sultan spring, the eternal heart of Jericho. That spring has never stopped flowing. It has fed life here since the Ice Age, when the Jordan Valley was a lush corridor between desert and sea. Migrating animals came to drink. Hunters followed. And then, for reasons we may never fully understand, they stayed. Jericho began not as a city, but as a camp, a cluster of huts near the water. People gathered grain, wove baskets, and buried their dead with care. And over generations, the camp became a village, the village a settlement, and the settlement a community that would one day raise walls and towers. The first heartbeat of something new, civilization, the layers beneath. Kathleen Kenyon's excavations revealed more than walls. She found ashes of ancient fires, fragments of figurines, stone tools, and animal bones. She uncovered 30 layers of human occupation, each one representing a rise, a fall, and a rebuilding. There were mud brick houses arranged in circles, suggesting kinship and community. In some homes, she found plastered skulls, human faces sculpted with care, perhaps to honor ancestors. Each discovery added a stroke to the portrait of a people learning to build, to farm, to belong. Jericho, she realized, was not born of empire, but of endurance, a settlement reborn over and over for 10 millennia, surviving earthquakes, floods, invasions, and time itself. The philosophy of dust and time. Now imagine the quiet of the desert at dusk. The wind has cooled, carrying the scent of salt and earth. Somewhere a dog barks, echoing across the valley. Kenyon kneels beside the mound, the fading sun painting the sky in copper. In that silence, she is surrounded by thousands of years, the remains of people who once laughed, wept, worked, and dreamed right where she stands. The dust beneath her feet is older than history, and yet it feels human. Through her careful work, the idea of Jericho as the first city takes shape, not because of grandeur or conquest, but because of something deeply human, the choice to stay. A city older than time. By the end of her excavation, Kenyon had rewritten history. Jericho was no longer just a biblical story. It was a monument to human persistence, a city of farmers, builders, and dreamers living thousands of years before writing even existed. The modern world began to see Jericho for what it truly was, the first whisper of urban life, the first experiment in society, the first collective heartbeat of civilization. When you stand there today, overlooking a mound, you can still see traces of those layers, like the rings of an ancient tree. Each one tells the same story. Humanity's endless effort to build something lasting in the face of time. And so, as the wind brushes against the palms and the spring murmurs in the dark, Jericho sleeps once more beneath the stars. Its ruins glow faintly under the moonlight, not as relics, but as memories. Memories of the first builders, the first farmers, the first dreamers who ever called a place home. Perhaps the true miracle of Jericho is not its walls, nor its towers, but this simple truth, that life, once begun here, never stopped. From the first footprints in the clay to the distant hum of cars on the modern road, Jericho has always endured. A city older than kings, older than stories, older than time itself. And somewhere beneath the sand, the first city on earth still whispers. The Neolithic dawn, life before civilization, had a name. The world is young. It is the twilight of the Ice Age, around 9000 BCE. Snow still lingers on distant mountains, but the Jordan Valley, a ribbon of green cutting through the desert, stirs with new life. The winds are softer now, the rains more frequent. Rivers and springs glimmer beneath the sun, feeding reeds, grasses, and groves of wild fig and palm. Animals move along the plain, gazelles, goats, and wild cattle, leaving trails that crisscross the soft earth. And at the heart of this changing world lies a spring that will never run dry, Ain Sultan. Beside it, a small group of humans make their home. They are the Natufians, hunter-gatherers who are beginning to dream of something more permanent. They do not yet have cities, kings, or writing. But here at the edge of a new era, they are about to create the first seeds of civilization, the first settlement. The air is cool in the early morning. Smoke rises from hearths built from stone and clay. Men sharpen flint blades by the water's edge, while women grind wild grains into coarse flour using smooth river stones. Their homes are round huts, woven from reeds and plastered with mud. Each one a single room, with a small hearth in the center. They are clustered together near the spring, a quiet circle of life surrounded by the vast stillness of the desert. At night, fires flicker. Children play beside their mothers as the elders tell stories of the hunt, of the stars, of the spirits that live in the water. In those simple stories are the beginnings of belief, of shared memory, of something larger than survival. They do not know it, but they are building the foundation of what will one day be the first city on earth, the gift of the land. In this fertile valley, wild wheat grows freely. At first, they gather it, baskets filled with golden stalks that shimmer in the sun. But soon, they learn something extraordinary. If they drop a few grains near their homes and wait for the rains, the earth gives birth again. The people of Jericho have made a discovery that will change the human story forever. They have found agriculture. Slowly, they begin to stay longer, moving less. Their lives, once bound to the chase, become rooted in the soil. They dig small pits to store grain, protecting it from mice and moisture. They plant near the spring, and soon they no longer wander. The first farmers are born. The rhythm of life. As seasons turn, the settlement grows. New huts rise beside the old. Paths form between them, beaten into the dust by countless bare feet. Every morning begins the same. The sound of querns grinding grain. The low hum of voices as people share bread baked on flat stones. The splash of water carried from the spring in clay jars. There are no kings here, no armies, only families working together. Their survival depends on cooperation. When one family's field floods, others help rebuild the terrace walls. When a child is sick, the elders bring herbs from the hills. Jericho is not yet a city of walls, but connection, the first human community bound by shared purpose. The tower and the wall. Around 8000 BCE, something new appears. The people build a massive stone tower, circular, nearly 9 meters high, with an inner staircase spiraling upward. Beside it, a thick wall surrounds the settlement. It is one of the first monumental structures ever built by human hands. Why did they build it? Was a fortress, protecting them from enemies? A flood barrier to hold back the waters from the spring? Or something sacred, a monument aligned with the setting sun? Archaeologists still debate its purpose. But one thing is certain. To build it, they needed organization, leadership, and faith in something greater than the individual. Imagine it, hundreds of people hauling stones in the blazing heat, their feet sinking into the clay, their voices echoing as they chant together. Dust rises like incense into the sky. When the tower is complete, it casts a long shadow across the valley, a shadow that marks the birth of architecture, the human impulse to build for eternity, the birth of belief. As Jericho grows, its people begin to think about death and what lies beyond it. They bury their dead beneath their homes, a sign that family and ancestors remain close. Sometimes, they remove the skulls and cover them with plaster, reshaping the faces, adding shells for eyes. Perhaps these were loved ones, remembered and honored. Perhaps they were guardians, protecting the living. Or perhaps they were the first gods, born not of heavens but of memory. When the night falls, fires flicker near these sacred relics. The people sing softly, wordless songs that echo across the centuries. Songs of gratitude, songs of belonging, songs of humanity just beginning to understand itself. The first vision of civilization. Over the centuries, Jericho becomes more than a settlement. It becomes a community. Paths become streets. Huts evolve into rectangular houses of mud brick, built side by side. Families farm together, share food, celebrate harvest, and honor their ancestors. Here, humanity learns to live not just for survival, but for meaning. They build storage rooms and gathering places. They trade with nearby villages, exchanging grain for salt, obsidian, and shells from distant coasts. Slowly, Jericho becomes the heart of a network, the first signs of society. And as they gather around their fires each night, the people begin to look at the stars differently. Perhaps they see patterns, stories, destinies written in the dark. They begin to imagine that the world has order, that the river flows for a reason, the sun rises for a purpose, and their place upon the earth matters. From that imagination comes culture, from culture, civilization. And it all began here, beside a spring in the desert, the silence between ages. Thousands of years pass in quiet cycles of planting and harvest, life and death. Jericho endures. Storms come, floods sweep through, yet the people rebuild. Generations pass, each adding new layers of earth and memory. If you stood there today, at the Mount of Tel Sultan, and looked closely, you could see it all in the soil. A cross-section of time, color upon color, layer upon layer, each one marking a different age of humanity. And beneath them all, at the very bottom, lies the Neolithic dawn, the time when everything began. As night settles over the desert, the spring still murmurs. The same spring that fed the first farmers, the same water that filled their clay pots, still flows. The stars above the valley burn faintly, just as they did 10,000 years ago. Perhaps someone once stood where you would stand now, looking up at those same constellations, wondering what lay beyond the horizon. Here, at Jericho, humanity took its first step into permanence. They planted seeds in the soil, and in doing so, planted the dream of civilization itself. From this quiet valley, the world would never be the same. And the wind sighs across the ruins, carrying with it a whisper from the dawn of time, the echo of the first people who called a place home. Walls of time, the great tower and the first urban experiment. The sun rises slowly over the Jordan Valley. Its first light spills across the mound of Tel Sultan, revealing stone walls that have stood in silence for over 10,000 years. They are not grand nor towering by modern standards, but they are ancient, older than the pyramids, older than writing, older even than the idea of civilization itself. And among them stands something extraordinary, a stone tower, circular and immense, its shadow stretching across the valley floor. This is not myth. It is real, and it is perhaps the first monument humanity ever built. A monument at the dawn of humanity. It is around 8,000 BC. The people of Jericho have already learned to farm, to build homes, and to bury their dead with care. But now, they look up in the soil and begin to dream higher. They gather stones from the nearby hills, smooth and heavy. Hundreds of hands pass them along a human chain, fitting them together with mud plaster. The work is slow, deliberate, rhythmic, a kind of sacred labor. Day after day, they raise the walls higher. When it is done, the tower stands 9 meters tall, roughly 3 stories, with a staircase spiraling inside. At its base, the walls of Jericho spread outward, forming a defensive ring around the settlement. It is the first time in human history that people have built something monumental, something meant to last beyond a single generation. And for what? To defend? To protect? Or to worship? Theories in the dust. Archaeologists still debate the tower's purpose. Some believe it was a fortification, built to guard against floods or enemies. Others think it was an observation post, watching over fields and herds. But perhaps the most haunting theory is the one connected to the sun. Researchers studying the tower's alignment discovered something remarkable. At the summer solstice, as the sun sets behind the Mount of Temptation, the shadow of the mountain falls directly upon the tower, as if the structure was built to greet the dying light. Could have been a cosmic calendar, marking the rhythm of the seasons, the life pulse of agriculture? Or was it a spiritual monument, a message written in stone to the heavens? We cannot know for sure. But what we do know is that the people of Jericho were no longer simply surviving. They were imagining. For the first time, humanity was building with symbolic intent, creating something that outlasted themselves. The first walls. Surrounding the tower was a massive stone wall, rising nearly 2 meters high and over a meter thick. To build such a structure required coordination, a level of social organization never seen before. Someone had to lead. Someone had to plan. And many had to follow. The people of Jericho were inventing architecture, leadership, and perhaps even labor division. They were becoming something new, urban. When you picture this ancient place, do not imagine chaos. Imagine purpose. Imagine hundreds of villagers, young and old, working side by side, their hands moving with quiet unity. Each stone laid was an act of faith, faith that what they were building would protect them and endure. The meaning of protection. The Jordan Valley was not always peaceful. Floods from the spring could sweep through suddenly. Earthquakes shook the ground. And beyond the walls, predators, both animal and human, roamed the plains. The wall gave the people of Jericho something no human had ever truly had before: security. For the first time, a community could close itself off, define its borders, and say, "This is us. This is home." The wall separated the world. Inside and outside, safety and danger, civilization and wilderness. It was not just a physical barrier. It was an idea. And that idea would echo through every city ever built since. Life within the walls. Inside the city, life continued in its timeless rhythm. Children played near the spring. Women pounded grain into flour. Men tended to crops of barley and wheat, their fields fanning out from the walls like rays of gold. The air smelled of earth, smoke, and bread. At dawn, light would pour down to the tower's stairway, scattering across its stone steps. Perhaps a deliberate design, perhaps a coincidence. To the people who lived there, it may have felt sacred, as though the tower connected their world to the heavens above. At night, the fires would flicker across the settlement, casting shadows that dance against the ancient stones. The tower stood watch, silent, patient, eternal. The first city-state of the mind. For the first time, humans were living in a planned community, houses arranged in patterns, pathways forming between them. This was not yet a city as we know it, with kings and markets, but it was the idea of one. The tower and the wall transformed Jericho from a cluster of huts into a single organism, a body with bones of stone and a heart of water. It was the first experiment in collective life, the moment humanity learned to build not just for the self, but for the many, and in doing so, they created a mirror of themselves, a physical reflection of unity, cooperation, and fear. Because at the heart of all cities lies a paradox. We build walls for safety, but walls also divide. We build towers to reach heaven, but they also cast shadows on the ground. Jericho was where that paradox began, echoes of ritual and time. Archaeologists found within these early walls traces of ritual, figures made of clay, bones arranged with care, and skulls plastered and painted, placed beneath homes. It seems that even as they built outward, with stone and mud, the people also built inward into the world of spirit and memory. Perhaps they believed their ancestors watched over them from within those walls, protecting the living. Perhaps the tower was not only a monument to life, but also a bridge to the dead. Whatever the reason, Jericho had become something no settlement had ever been before, a sacred space, a place where life, death, work, and worship intertwined. The tower's legacy. As centuries passed, Jericho grew and changed. New homes replaced the old. Floods tore down walls, and the people rebuilt them layer upon layer. The tower eventually crumbled, buried under silt and time, but its presence endured. It remained beneath the surface, waiting for rediscovery thousands of years later. When Kathleen Kenyon unearthed it in the 1950s, she stood in awe. Before her eyes rose a handiwork of people who had lived before pottery, before metal, before history itself. She wrote, "Here lies evidence that human imagination was older than we ever dreamed. The great Tower of Jericho, built by hands that never saw writing or steel, remains a monument to humanity's first leap toward civilization, the shadow that still falls." As the music softens, imagine standing at the base of that ancient tower now. The sun sets over the Mount of Temptation, and just as it did 10,000 years ago, its shadow stretches across the mound. The valley is silent, save for the wind moving through the reeds. The air feels heavy with memory. You close your eyes, and for a moment, time dissolves. You can almost hear them, the murmur of workers, the scrape of stone against stone, the laughter of children nearby, the sound of life eternal, long before Babylon or Athens, before the pyramids or Rome. A small people in a quiet valley looked at the sun and built a tower. They raised walls not just of stone, but of hope. And with those walls, humanity began to dream in permanence. The earth moved slowly in the Jordan Valley. Over thousands of years, its heart is beaten to a rhythm older than memory, a rhythm of destruction and rebirth. Beneath the mound of Tel Es Sultan, Where Jericho once stood proud, archaeologists have counted 30 distinct layers of civilization. 30 times the city was built, destroyed, and rebuilt again. 30 cycles of human hope rising from the same soil. Every layer tells the same story. That no matter what came, flood, quake, or flame, the people returned. They could not leave this place. The spring of Ain-es Sultan still flowed, and where there is water, there is life. The fragile peace of the Neolithic. It is around 7000 BC. Jericho's walls and towers still stand, though weathered by wind and time. The settlement hums with life. Flocks grazing beyond the walls, children playing in the dust, farmers tending small fields of barley and wheat. The air smells of clay and bread, of life unfolding slowly in the warmth of the sun. But this peace is fragile. Beneath the valley, the earth stirs. The Jordan Rift is alive, a fault line that breathes and shifts. From time to time, the land trembles, walls crack, houses crumble, and the people, frightened but unbroken, rebuild. They mix new mud, shape new bricks, and raise their homes once more upon the ruins of the old. Each new generation quite literally builds their life on top of their ancestors' remains. The mound of Jericho grows higher, a living monument to persistence. The fire in the night. At times, destruction comes not from the earth, but from human hands. One night, in the deep past, a spark becomes a flame. Perhaps a cooking fire spread too wide, or perhaps something darker, an attack from wandering tribes. The flames leap between houses of mud and reed. The night sky glows orange. Ash fills the air. People flee with their children, clutching clay jars and baskets of grain. The tower's shadow dances wildly across the chaos. By morning, the settlement is gone, blackened earth. The smell of smoke, silence. But soon after, when the embers cool, they return. They rebuild, because the spring still runs, because the valley still feeds them, because Jericho cannot die. The people of the plastered skulls. In the aftermath of these disasters, something changes in the hearts of Jericho's people. They begin to treat their dead differently. No longer are bodies buried deep in the earth and forgotten. Instead, they are honored, remembered. Archaeologists have found the remains, skulls carefully removed, reshaped with plaster, and painted with red ochre. Shells form eyes that seem to watch across time. These faces, silent, serene, are among the oldest human portraits ever made. Perhaps they were loved ones, preserved so their spirits would remain among the living. Perhaps they were early gods, protectors of the settlement. No one knows. But when you look into their shell eyes, you feel something unmistakable, an echo of tenderness, of continuity. Even in loss, Jericho found meaning. Even in death, the people found renewal. The Phoenix City. Through the centuries, Jericho becomes a city of layers. Each destruction leaves behind ashes, and within those ashes, seeds of new life. Floods come down from the mountains, bringing rich silt that nourishes the soil. Farmers rebuild their irrigation channels. Children are born, grow, and take their parents' places. Houses rise upon houses, each one a whisper built upon another. When archaeologists dig through these layers, they find fragments, tools, bones, walls, pottery, each from a different age, yet all bound by the same thread, persistence. It is as if Jericho itself has a soul, one that refuses to fade. The first great transition. By 6000 BCE, the Neolithic world begins to change. The climate shifts, rains lessen, and the once green valley begins to dry. The spring still flows, but the fields yield less. People adapt once again. They begin to trade beyond their valley, exchanging grain, salt, and bitumen for obsidian shells and tools from distant lands. For the first time, Jericho connects to the wider world. New technologies appear, pottery, weaving, and improved farming tools. The city grows smaller for a time, but more complex. Families organize, traditions solidify. What began as survival becomes culture. The people of Jericho are no longer just settlers. They are citizens of the world's first continuous community. Earthquakes and renewal. But again and again, the ground betrays them. The earthquakes of the Jordan Rift strike, without warning. Walls fall, homes split open. Then come the fires, the collapses, the silences. Each time, the people face a choice, leave or rebuild. Each time they choose to stay. They have buried their ancestors here, lived and died here. To leave would be to abandon their history, their faith, their very identity. And so Jericho rises once more, each layer thicker, each wall higher. It becomes not just a city, but a record of endurance, proof that human will can outlast the forces of nature itself. The Bronze Age horizon. By the time we reach the Bronze Age, around 3000 BCE, Jericho is transformed again. New people arrive, traders, settlers, nomads from the east. The city's walls are rebuilt in stone and mud brick, larger and stronger than before. It becomes a hub for trade between the Jordan Valley, the Dead Sea, and the highlands beyond. Caravans pass through carrying copper, salt, and spices. The air fills with new languages, new faces. Jericho, once a small Neolithic village, now stands as a city of continuity, a living archive of human history stretching back millennia. But the pattern remains unchanged. Floods will come again. Earthquakes will tear through again. The walls will fall, and the people will rebuild. Always. The lesson of time. When archaeologists cut to the mound, they can see the city's entire life written in the earth. Dark layers of ash, pale bands of clay, the debris of fallen homes, and new bricks laid above them. It is the physical embodiment of human resilience. If you could hold one handful of soil from Tel Es Sultan, it would contain traces of 10,000 years of human struggle, burnt straw from a Neolithic roof, pottery shards from the Bronze Age, dust from Roman sandals. Every grain of that soil carries a story of beginning again. The storm fades. Rain falls gently across the desert. Drops strike the old stones where walls once stood. Water, the same element that sustained Jericho, trickles down into the earth, feeding the spring that has never ceased to flow. And somewhere in that eternal cycle of fire, flood, ruin, and rebirth lies the true story of Jericho. Not the story of its tower or its walls or its fame in the Bible, but the story of something far more human. The refusal to give up. Perhaps Jericho endured, not because of its walls, but because of the spirit behind them, the unbreakable will to rebuild, again and again, until the city itself became time's reflection. The rain fades. The spring murmurs once more. The night sky deepens above the valley. And as the stars glimmer over the sleeping mound, Jericho dreams again, waiting for the dawn. The trumpets of legend, Jericho in the Bible, and beyond. The desert night is silent. Stars burn like scattered embers across the blackness of the sky. And in that silence, a voice from ancient scripture still whispers. And the walls of Jericho fell down flat. The words come from the book of Joshua, written thousands of years after the Neolithic city had already crumbled into dust. Yet, somehow, this story of trumpets, warriors, and divine victory would breathe new life into Jericho, transforming it from a forgotten ruin into a symbol of faith and miracle. Tonight, we travel through the meeting point of history and legend, where the stones of Tel Es Sultan meet the words of the Bible, where myth and archaeology intertwine. The biblical city. According to the Hebrew Bible, it was near this very mound, in the wide plain of the Jordan, that the Israelites stood after 40 years in the wilderness. Before them rose the walls of Jericho, a city so fortified that it was said to be impenetrable. Inside its gates, Canaanite life flourished, markets filled with grain and wine, soldiers patrolling ramparts, priests tending shrines to ancient gods. To the Israelites, the city was a final barrier to their promised land. To the people within, it was home, the heart of their world. And then the story unfolds like a vision. Joshua, chosen successor of Moses, receives a command from the divine, not to attack, but to march. For 6 days, his people circle the walls in silence, led by priests carrying sacred trumpets of ram's horn, the shofar. On the 7th day, at dawn, they circle 7 times. Then Joshua commanded the people to shout, and when the trumpets sounded, the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city. It is one of the most powerful images in ancient literature, the walls of a mighty city collapsing not through war, but through faith. Echoes in the earth. But what truth lies beneath the poetry? Archaeologists have been digging at Jericho for more than a century, peeling back layer after layer of civilization, searching for evidence of this event. In the 1930s, the British archaeologist John Garstang believed he found it. He uncovered massive collapsed walls, great heaps of fallen mud brick, and declared that this must have been the destruction of Jericho described in the Bible. He dated the event to around 1400 BCE, aligning perfectly with Joshua's conquest. The world was captivated. For a moment, it seemed that archaeology had proven Scripture true, but time and science would complicate that hope. The challenge of time. 2 decades later, another archaeologist, Kathleen Kenyon, meticulous and patient, returned to Jericho with new methods. She cut to the mound like a surgeon through time, examining pottery, carbon traces, and architectural patterns with the precision of modern archaeology. Her conclusion shocked the world. The Great Walls Garstang found, they were real, but much older. They dated not to 1400 BCE, but to nearly 1550 BCE, long before the Israelites would have arrived. By Joshua's supposed time, the city of Jericho had already been abandoned, a ghost mound overlooking the Jordan Valley. The biblical walls, it seemed, had already fallen centuries earlier. It was as if the story had remembered a ruin that was already ancient, weaving its crumbled stones into a new myth, the power of story. But perhaps, in another sense, the story was still true, not as an event of warfare, but as a spiritual metaphor. To the ancient Hebrews, Jericho represented more than just a city. It was the first obstacle, the final test of faith before entering a new life. The falling walls symbolized transformation, the collapse of fear, of bondage, of the old world. Every culture has its sacred symbols of victory over the impossible. For the Israelites, it was the walls of Jericho. And so the story lived on through generations, through temple chants, through psalms sung by wandering tribes. Jericho became the city where faith moved mountains. The archaeologist's candle. Imagine an archaeologist at dawn, brushing dust from an ancient wall at Tel Es Sultan. Behind them, the sun rises over Jordan. The stones glow golden, ancient, silent witnesses to 10,000 years of life. In that moment, the boundaries between science and myth blur. Perhaps the Bible remembered not a single event, but the memory of Jericho's countless destructions, its endless cycles of fall and renewal, passed down through oral tradition until they became legend. Each collapse became one great fall. Each rebuilding became one act of divine will. History transformed into sacred story. And when the people of later ages stood before the ruin, they felt the power of the place, the weight of time pressing from below. Jericho, the eternal city of dust and dawn. The trumpets still sound. Across centuries, the image of Jericho's walls has resonated through art, music, and faith. In medieval churches, choirs sang, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. In Renaissance paintings, golden light bathes the moment of collapse. The trumpets raised high, the walls crumbling in divine glory. In African American spirituals, the song of Jericho became a cry of liberation, a promise that every barrier can fall through faith and perseverance. And in quiet desert nights, the wind through the palms sounds almost like the breath of those ancient trumpets, low, hollow, and haunting. The meeting of worlds. Modern archaeology may never prove or disprove the story entirely, but in a deeper sense it doesn't need to, because Jericho is real. Its walls are real. Its people were real. And the story, whether written by prophets or by the hands of time, carries a truth beyond carbon dates and stratigraphy. It tells us that the human spirit has always sought meaning in the rise and fall of cities, that every ruin is a lesson, that every ending is a beginning disguised. When the walls of Jericho fell, whenever that may have been, something eternal rose in their place, the idea that faith and endurance can outlast stone. The desert is quiet now. The stars fade as dawn returns to the valley. A pale light touches the mound of Tel Es Sultan, where ancient walls once rose and where the spring of life still flows. A shepherd passes with his flock. A bird lands on a broken stone. The air carries the scent of earth and water, the same as it has for 10,000 years. Perhaps that is the true miracle of Jericho, not the falling walls, but the fact that it still breathes, still flowing, still standing, still alive in memory and faith. And the walls of Jericho fell down flat, not as an end, but as the beginning of a story that never truly ends. The city of time, Jericho in the modern world. The dawn over the valley. The sun rises slowly over the Jordan Valley. A soft golden light spills across the desert floor, bathing the ancient mound of Tel Es Sultan in a glow that feels eternal. Birds circle overhead. The palm trees shimmer in the morning heat. And from the heart of the earth, as it has for 10,000 years, the spring of Ain Es Sultan still flows, quiet, constant, alive. Here, among the echoes of time, stands Jericho, often called the city of the moon, the city of palm trees, and the first city on earth. A city that has been destroyed and reborn more times than we can count. A city that carries within its soil the memory of all humanity, the layers of history. Archaeologists call it Tel a mound built not by nature, but by generations of people building, destroying, and rebuilding in the same place. If you could cut through its heart, you would see history itself stacked like pages of an unending book. The Neolithic foundations, where farmers built the first walls known to humankind. The Bronze Age ramparts, weathered by war and earthquake. The Canaanite ruins, steeped in trade, faith, and legend. The Hellenistic and Roman layers, when Jericho became a winter paradise for kings. The Byzantine mosaics, glimmering beneath centuries of dust. And finally, the modern city, living quietly beside the ruins, still nourished by the ancient spring. Every era lies upon another, each generation dreaming atop the bones of its ancestors. Every layer whispers the same word: continuity, the modern city. Today's Jericho is small, peaceful, sunlit, and patient. It sits near the Dead Sea, surrounded by date palms and citrus groves. Its people walk the same valley their distant ancestors once did, though now the sounds of cars mix with the bray of donkeys and the call to prayer. Children play near the ancient mound, unaware that beneath their feet lie 10 millennia of human life. Farmers draw water from the same spring that once sustained the first city walls. Tourists stand in awe, staring at layers of soil that tell the story of civilization itself. And at dusk, when the light fades and the desert breathes again, the world feels timeless, as if the ghosts of first builders still watch from the shadows. The archaeologist's dream. For those who study Jericho, each handful of soil is a message from the past, a fragment of pottery, a grain of charred wheat, a buried foundation. All of it speaks. Each discovery redraws the map of human origins. Jericho challenges us to rethink what it means to be civilized. Its earliest builders had no metal, no writing, no kings. Yet they organized, built, defended, and remembered. They were already shaping the pattern of what humanity would become. When we look into Jericho's ancient face, we see our own reflection: curiosity, fear, hope, and resilience. The timeless spring. There is something poetic in the fact that the spring of Ain Es Sultan has never stopped flowing. Through floods and droughts, through conquest and empire, it has whispered the same steady song beneath the soil. The people may change. The languages may vanish. The walls may fall and rise again. But the water, the giver of life, endures. It is as if the spring itself is the city's heart, beating beneath time, keeping Jericho alive even when the world forgets its name. The voices beneath the dust. In the quiet of evening, when the tourists leave and the desert air cools, the ruins speak again. The stones of the old tower catch the moonlight. The crumbled walls cast long shadows across the ground. If you listen closely, you might hear faint voices, not ghosts, but the memories of generations. The builders mixing clay, the shepherds leading their flocks, the mothers grinding grain, the laughter of children who once ran where the archaeologists now dig. Their lives were brief, but their traces remain. In this place, time does not erase, it accumulates. Jericho is not just the oldest city. It is the oldest memory that the earth still carries. The city as a mirror. When you think about Jericho, it becomes more than history. It becomes philosophy. Every civilization, no matter how great, rises and falls. Empires come and go. But beneath it all, the soil remembers. Jericho teaches us that civilization is not a line. It is a circle. that humanity's story is not one of constant progress, but a persistence, rebuilding what was lost again and again. And in that repetition, there is beauty. In that endurance, there is grace. From stone to story. It is strange to realize that this quiet mound in the Jordan Valley connects to every city on earth. The skyscrapers of New York, the boulevards of Paris, the temples of Kyoto, all carry the same spark that was born here. The impulse to gather, to protect, to build walls, to create art, to worship, to remember. Jericho is where the city was invented, where humanity first looked at the earth and said, "This is home." The eternal watcher. As night descends once more, the desert falls silent. The stars shimmer above the valley. The ancient tower, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, stands as a silhouette against the moon. It has seen the rise of kings, the birth of gods, the march of armies, and the slow, patient work of archaeologists with brushes and lights. And still it watches, unblinking, unmoved. In its shadow, Jericho breathes. Not dead, not forgotten, simply waiting, as it has always done, the breath of time. Perhaps this is why Jericho endures, not because of its power or its riches or its fame, but because it carries the purest truth of humanity, that even in ruin we begin again. Every wall that falls gives way to new foundations. Every generation builds upon the echoes of the last. The first city on earth was never truly destroyed. It simply changed form, from stone to soil, from story to song, from past to present. Time flows like the spring of Jericho, the narrator whispers, forever moving, forever returning. The wind sighs through the valley. The stars glisten like ancient eyes above the ruins. And the spring continues to sing, softly, eternally, carrying the memory of humanity's first home into the night.